Hey, it's Ryan from Upfit Supply, and we just purchased this Ram ProMaster behind me, and I'm a little bit bummed because there's this giant dent here on the side of the wall that was caused from cargo shifting around on the inside of the van, and so it chipped the paint, and the previous owner tried to cover it up a little bit, but it's only a matter of time before it starts corroding and rusting, and so I want to run a test. I want to know if they would have installed Legend liners on the inside, could they have prevented this nightmare from happening? Let's find out. So I purchased this used 2014 Ram ProMaster 3500. It's the 159-inch regular wheelbase with the high roof height. It's definitely been used. The previous owner used it for expediting, and as you can see from some of these videos, there's dents and dings all throughout the interior of the van. Some of those that you can see from the outside, but there's one that kind of stands above the rest, this giant dent here. And from the inside, you can tell that something happened, something shifted and moved around, and it shattered through the OEM paneling and left this wholesome dent on the outside of the van. And so my question is, if we would have installed some cargo van liners, could we have prevented this damage from happening? Now, if you're not familiar with cargo van liners or Legend Fleet liners, they're essentially a plastic fluted liner. They're about 0.4 inches thick. You can get them insulated as well, and basically what they do is they protect the interior of their van. They're super strong, they're super durable, so if you have stuff shift around in the van, it's gonna, leave a dent on that liner rather than going through the sheet metal in the van, because when you buy these off the lot, they're just all exposed sheet metal in the back, and that sheet metal is the exterior of the van. So any damage that occurs on the inside, you can see from the outside and has consequences on the outside of the van. So as I thought about how to run a test to see if we could have prevented this dent, I remembered that Legend came out with this video called the axe test. And what they were doing in the video was showing their product versus competitors' products and how they hold up against an axe. And of course, they're the manufacturer. They're not going to come out with a video that shows that their liners fail from an axe hitting it. So I thought maybe I could replicate that. I'm more of an independent resource, if you will. And I want to see, could the liners hold up to an axe? How would that perform? And could it prevent something like this from happening? And so that's what I did. I built a little contraption here with an axe head on there. And don't laugh at me. I'm not a carpenter. I'm not a builder or anything like that. I just did what I could to try and replicate this test. And so we have an axe here. I've got a little contraption where we can attach the liners and some different materials and see how they hold up against the axe. And this is just going to be some fun seeing what happens. So my little contraption here, there's a 4-pound Michigan axe on there that's attached to a piece of 2x4 and then through a little dowel that's essentially about 2.5 feet from the axe head to the center of rotation. And so that's basically, you can do all the math and figure out how much force this would be hitting if we dropped it from a 90-degree angle all the way into the material. And so we're going to put some different material in there and see what happens, how it holds up to an axe. So the first piece of material I'm going to put in this test is a piece of sheet metal that's going to replicate the sheet metal of the side of the van, because I want to know, would this axe even leave a dent in the side of the van? And so I've got a piece of sheet metal here. This is 1 millimeter thick. It's just some leftover scrap I have from a shelf. I'm going to put it in there, see what kind of damage it does to the shelf, to see if we can get a dent similar to this in the side of this. Then we'll put in some liners and some other material and see how it holds up against the axe. All right, so this sheet metal, it left quite a bit of a dent right here. I don't know if you can see that. It did come in, this sheet metal that I had this structural ridge right here, so it's a little bit stronger than it would if it would have hit down lower, but did leave a decent gash. You can see on the back we've got a dent there. It actually bent this entire piece of sheet metal right there, so it sits crooked. I don't know if you can see that. So clearly if that would have happened on the side of the van, it would show through in the form of some type of dent if you had that 4-pound piece of metal slamming into the side of the van. So this is how our sheet metal turned out. All right, next I have a piece of the OEM paneling that's in the back of the ProMaster. This is just what comes from the factory. I cut it kind of to fit in that contraption, if you will. It's undamaged, all that. We're gonna see how this holds up. It did not hold up very well at all to whatever shifted around on the inside of the van to cause this dent. So I'm curious to see how it does against our 4-pound axe. And drop. So clearly this OEM material paneling is not made to handle a whole bunch of weight being thrown at it. This shattered pretty easily, went right through it. You could see inside of our van it was just shattered. Almost every single panel was damaged. And so this really is more of an aesthetic panel than anything. It maybe might keep some scratches away and things like that, but it's really not gonna help stop any loads or heavy objects from hitting the side of the van. This did not do very well in our axe test. Now I've seen people do this before. They'll use like wood paneling or plywood on the inside of the van. So I have a piece of wood paneling here. This is 4 millimeters thick. It's just kind of a standard piece of wood paneling. And I want to know, could this hold up to the axe? All right, surprisingly, this wood paneling did a little bit better than I thought it would. You can see our primary hit right there. It did leave a decent sized gash, and you can see in the back, it did break through the paneling there. So, you know, you would probably get a couple of swings at this and be able to protect the side of the van. But again, it's you know, a decent amount of damage there. And I think that's from our second hit right there on the bounce, left a decent gash as well. I also have a piece of 1/2-inch plywood here. This is the good stuff that, you know, your hardboard, that's really nice. It's not that cheap 1/2-inch plywood that you can get. I've also seen all sorts of plywood be placed on the inside of the van to protect those walls as well. So let's see how this holds up. Now our 1/2-inch plywood did really well. This isn't particle board, it's plywood. You can hardly see that little gash right there from the axe. So this held up really well. The downside of plywood obviously is that it's heavy, and if you get it wet, it kind of deteriorates pretty quickly. So that's the downside of using something like this inside of a van. But it held up pretty well in our axe test. Next I have here a cutout of the OEM floor that you can get with the Ram ProMaster. It's this kind of plywood material, pretty thick, almost a 1/2 inch thick, has this honeycomb texture on the top. We're gonna throw this in there and just see how it holds up to the axe. Now this flooring we put in there just for fun. It performed really well. I don't even know if you can see that little dent there in the floor. So it did really well. It just shows you the importance of having a solid floor in your ProMaster. This is the factory floor that you can get from the factory. I think it's like a $500 upgrade, so it's really a good deal. Held up really well against the axe. Obviously you need that with the floor when you're putting heavy things on there. So this did really well as expected. The downside of this type of material, you can see it's plywood in there, is if it gets wet, or you get snow on it, salt, all those kinds of things just gets absorbed into the wood and deteriorates over time. But it does have kind of a vinyl sheeting on top that will cut down a lot on the surface wetness that can happen and things like that. It's more if it gets soaked, you'll have some issues, as opposed to going with like a composite type of floor. All right, here I have a piece of Duratherm liner. It's just cut out in a rectangle to fit into our little testing contraption there. This liner, there's about 1/4 inch of this plastic corrugated material. This is really the part that protects the vehicle. And then there's also some insulation on the back for the Duratherm. It has a layer of foil and then a layer of insulation behind that. And so all in, we're about 0.4 inches of thickness here. And you know, if this was mounted inside the van, this would have been mounted over top of where this dent occurred, and so rather than the load going through the OEM panel and then into the sheet metal, it would go into the Duratherm liner, and I want to know, would it hold up, and will it hold up against our axe test? Let's find out. All right, now our Duratherm liner, obviously it did leave a mark. It did not break through. You can see on the back, you know, completely intact insulation back here. It took it pretty well. I mean, it left a mark, but it did not get through this. It's not gonna get through and get to the sheet metal of the van, so it did a really good job of holding up. It's gonna get scuffed up and marked up if you beat it up like this, so you'll have to deal with that, but that's a lot better than a dent in the side of your van with paint chipping and all of that. So it held up really nicely. So thanks for joining me for this fun little test. Now, if you're looking for these liners or any other equipment to upfit your van so that it's work ready, be sure to check us out at upfitsupply.com. Again, my name is Ryan, and have a good one.